Hi there, and welcome to the Campfire Project. And today I have with me three special guests again. First of all, Joel Hawbaker from Alabama. Joel, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat today. I am a high school history and Bible teacher. I'm also a soccer coach and an author and a professional speaker. I live in Alabama with my wife and our two kids. Actually, I'm part of a blended family. So we have our kids one week and then not the next week. So that's part of our parenting world.
Excellent. I mean, that's going to fit in really well with our discussion about fathers and our role with our children, etc. today. And we have with us also Thomas Hewlett from LA. Thomas,
yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Yeah, I'm a writer. I write novels. I live in Los Angeles with my wife. I also do a lot of recovery work with addicts and alcoholics. It's part of my work.
Excellent. And we also have, welcome back again, Henry Johnstone. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Henry.
Hey, Alan, it's great to be here again with you fine gentlemen. I'm Henry Johnstone. I'm a life coach and a metalwork artist. I help men and women discover their self-esteem and their self-worth to make them feel way more powerful than they ever thought was ever possible. And I also run metalwork retreats to help people develop their confidence. And I live in London, although I'm here in North Norfolk in the countryside with my dog, enjoying some serious downtime.
Excellent. We've just had Joel with his dogs a little while ago, so it's really great to have the animals around. Now, it's really great again because different parts of America and England as well. So we're really getting this as a global connection between all the men, which is really fantastic. And we're getting the new ideas and varying discussions going as well. But today we've talked before about what the role was to be a man. Then we talked about being in a relationship. But one of the biggest things is, and I know it's going to impact on a lot of men today, is our roles as fathers. Not only our role in the family where we were fathers ourselves of boys and girls, but also where we were children ourselves. So we were somebody's son. And how that's impacted on our life coming through, what our father's role was in our life, and what our role therefore is going to be in our children. How one role that we went through as a child, how that's now impacting on us as parents. So looking at things like shame and other things that we may have experienced. So first of all, Joel, we started with you. So can you give us a little bit of a background of your growing up as a child, what your life was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, my dad has always been my hero. He was the person that I consciously patterned a lot of my life patterns after. He was a retired military officer. He was lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army and a Vietnam vet. And to me, he was just the kindest, most genuine guy I'd ever met. And so I really wanted to be a lot like him. I played some of the same sports and patterned some of my personality traits after him. But it's really interesting because my older brother had the opposite relationship with my dad. My older brother and my dad almost never got along until the last couple years of my dad's life. And as I got older, I realized part of the reason my dad and I got along so well is because we were already very similar. He and my brother were not. And so to hear me tell the story of who my dad was and to hear my brother tell the story is to get very different pictures of the same man. And that was really eye-opening for me in my 20s. Like I said, Dad and I got along real well. So my parents divorced when I was in middle school. So throughout high school, excuse me, Dad and I remained close. He came and watched me play sports when I was in college and those kinds of things, and was always really thankful to have had that great example. I wrote an ebook a couple years ago about my dad and about his leadership. And again, I think to this day, I think my brother still hasn't read it because he just, he has a hard time with what he saw as my very different relationship with Dad, because his was so much more strained. And it was really helpful for me to realize one of the reasons Dad and I were able to get along so well is because how much my brother and my dad had fought, and Dad had mellowed out by the time that I got to the same age my brother had been. So that's a little bit of it, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. I had a great relationship with Dad pretty much always, and part of that is because we were very, very similar. And what was eye-opening for me was to see the different way my brother had related to him. And that was really helpful for me when I became a parent, because both of my daughters are very different. One of them is a lot like me. One of them is not as much like me. And so it's helped me to realize I need to go out of my way to make better connections with the one that I don't have as much in common with. And I learned that from my dad and my brother's relationship.
And that's really the impact, isn't it? First of all, there's the age difference, so the difference in the parent by the time you get to the younger child, but also the impact of the different personalities as well. And being able to relate to each other, especially when you're very different to the other person. How did yours childhood, Thomas?
I've had a pretty varied experience with relationship with my father over the years. When I come from a family of 4 kids, and I was the youngest boy. And I think my 2 older brothers had a much easier time connecting with my dad than I did. While we shared some of the same interests, my personality was different, and I don't think he truly understood that. But the parts of us that were similar, I think his strategy for connecting to me was to overly emphasize how similar, where we were similar. And for me, that had kind of a negative effect on my kind of honing my own identity. Was very hard. It's very hard to get out of his shadow, because my older brothers got into long-term relationships and marriages sooner than I did. And I think for me, my life was kind of the vicarious single man's life my dad was living, because he married my mom at 19, right out of high school. And they had met in grammar school. So parts of my experience, I think he kind of leaned in too heavily. And it took a very long time for me to separate where I began, where he ended. And I think I think overall in any man's life, father can cast a long shadow. And for me, that was definitely the case. It took quite some time. And we've had, when I did make that separation, it's really strained our relationship. And to this very day, and we're currently estranged. I haven't talked to him in quite some time. And when we do talk, it's very, I haven't come to that place of peace and understanding with him. And so we don't butt heads anymore, but we have a lot of stuff to still unpack. And as my dad put it recently in an email to me, actually, he said, we still have too many questions unasked and unanswered, which I agree with. So we're in a different phase of our relationship. And the more I go with working with other men and working with different men's groups, the more I learn about that. It's been pretty eye-opening to kind of put myself in his shoes. And what does it mean for a man to get married at 19 and by 25 have 4 kids and be the sole support? Like, I can't imagine doing that. And it took me a long time to come to that place where, like, okay, so what would I have done in his shoes? And I'm kind of working through all that currently.
Excellent. And how about yourself, Henry?
So I consider myself quite lucky with my father. Like, the beginning was always really difficult. I was very similar to him. Bless him, he didn't quite know how to express his emotions. He was by no means cold. He certainly communicated to me that he loved me in his own way. He was there to help me through some really difficult times when I was growing up, because he saw his difficulties in my difficulties. When I got into addiction and alcoholism, it got so dark and it got so bad that and I wrote a post about this earlier today, we walked the same path to our darkest points. And it came to a point where he openly told me that he wished I would just die, and I wanted to die too. But in recovery, we have walked back from there. And we're now at a point where that journey is in everything that we ever say to each other. It's not explicit, but it's there in a loving and respectful way. So I feel very lucky to have forged a very strong relationship with my father. Of course, there were some shit things that went down that affected me as a child, but I'm very, very lucky to have such a strong and rich relationship with my father today.
Yeah, and as you were saying, Thomas, with the shadow, etc. See, in my case, my father died when I was 3, so I didn't really know him. So I actually, to understand what my father was about, was asked as many questions as I could, got a few answers, not many, but what I actually was told about, and then I spent the rest of my youth trying to live up to that image. So that even, as you said, your father was there, he's cast that shadow. In my case, I went looking for that shadow and then immersed myself in that, to be able to understand what it was to be me. You know, how did I connect to my father? So there's always those issues that come out. But as you said, Henry, there's also that situation where it sounded like in your case with your dad, it was, he said, you know, he wished you would die and everything else. That was because it was reminding him of what he'd been through, but it just...
No, I think because I just did a litany of hideous things to him and to my family and to my mum. You know, they just wanted me to die. That was it.
Makes it pretty tough, doesn't it? So with the impact that we've had with our fathers and everything else, where do you think that we need to look at as men in, you know, raising our kids? What sort of things, in your case, Joel, where do you think your focus is?
I think one of the things for me, especially in my blended family world, is so I only get my girls half the time because they're with me for a week and then their mom for a week. And what that means is I need to consciously be better at spending time with them. I need to choose to put them above other things going on in my world. So whether that means coming home earlier from soccer practice or not. So like for one example is February, my younger daughter will turn 12. And so the night of her birthday, I just don't schedule soccer games. I did the first year I was at this particular school. And then my wife kind of mentioned to me, hey, we'd love to not have to come to a soccer game on Olivia's birthday. We'd love it if you could just come home. And it should have probably occurred to me, but it didn't occur to me until my wife mentioned that, hey, maybe your daughter would appreciate you not scheduling some other event on her birthday. And that was very eye-opening for me to just realize, okay, yeah, you know what? If I'm constantly doing these other things, what I'm showing my children is that those things are more important to me than they are. And so that's one of the things for me, again, especially in the limited time I have, I need to be willing to put aside what other priorities I may have to show my children that I love them. And I'm very thankful for opportunities to do that. So my younger daughter plays basketball right now. My older daughter plays soccer right now. And our schedules are pretty busy. But I do whatever I can, especially when they're with us, to put my phone down or put whatever book I'm reading down or turn off the live stream of the Manchester United game or whatever and just hang out with my kids and ask my older daughter's 14, almost 15. And one of my favorite things is just sit and talk with her and just say, hey, tell me about your day. How are things going with your friends at school? And sometimes she doesn't want to talk because she's a teenage girl. And sometimes she'll talk for 2 hours because she's a teenage girl, right? And, but the fact that my teenage daughter will sit down with me and open up her heart and say, here's this thing that's going well. Here's this thing I'm struggling with. Like, that's huge to me. That's something that I'm really thankful for. And again, it's because I can look back and realize there were times when my dad did that really well. He never missed one of our sporting events. You know, he was at all my baseball and soccer and basketball games, that kind of stuff. He was at all of our choir concerts or whatever it may have been. And he really made it a point to prioritize celebrating what we were doing. I didn't do that when my kids were younger, and it cost me in my first marriage. Now that I'm remarried, I want to do that better. And I'm learning how to do that as my kids get older. So that's a big part of what it looks like for me. It's just consciously choosing to put their interests in front of mine, at least in the time that I have them.
Excellent. And Thomas, how do you see this for yourself and your kids?
I don't currently have any children. This year, actually, my wife and I have started the adoption program to get ourselves in on that, and we're planning to adopt a child here. So this is something I think about a lot, and it's one of the main reasons I got involved in men's groups is because almost every day I really think about when that child is here and I'm making space for them, like, who are they going to be seeing me as? Mm-hmm. And do I want to bring this energy of, my own issues unresolved and the things I've inherited from my dad, or do I want that to be resolved and at peace and be a whole integrated man for them. Obviously, like, I want to be that person. So the fact that this year this child is going to be in my home is really, it's really pushing me to see myself objectively as a man and a potential father. Like, you know, what kind of energy am I presenting to them? And because I know, like, from my own experience, obviously, those formative years, it's, you know, it's going to carry their entire life. And I want to be thinking heavily about my legacy and what I'm passing on from day one. Excellent. So this is something that's been on my mind almost constantly right now.
And Henry, you're not a father as yet either, are you?
No, but I am so broody. Oh my goodness. I never thought that I would have children. That was before I met my current partner. And I had a kind of a shift. I was like, instead of me not wanting to have children, like, does a child deserve to have me as my dad? Like, let's look at it that way. And that was something that I just couldn't ignore. I was like, yes, absolutely. I want to be able to give to that. Something that my parents didn't do, bless their hearts, was they never instructed me or modeled for me healthy emotional behavior. You know, anger was ruled out. Sadness or deep depression, you know, was something to be uncomfortable around. They certainly didn't know how to handle it with me. They didn't have the right tools. I do have the right tools to manage that. And I want to model really healthy expression of, like, it is okay to not feel okay. It is okay to be angry. It is okay to be sad. And in that way, foster, like, a genuine human connection with them, so that I am their father. You know, and I can and I will always be there for them, and nothing that they feel is ever need to be, you know, shamed or to feel guilty, because I carried a lot of shame and a lot of guilt with me all the way through my life, which manifested in massive roadblocks later on in my life.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I looked at too. When I grew up, I was an angry kid. I went through a lot of bullying, and people used to keep saying to me, "Get rid of your anger." Well, it's one of the emotions that we have in our bodies. We're some of all those different emotions, but it's not so much you need to get rid of anger. You need to know when to channel it. Because if somebody came up to Joel, so somebody came up and threatened your daughters, would it be appropriate to get angry?
Yep.
You know, just turn the other cheek.
Yes, it would.
Get very angry. So there's an appropriate time for all of that. So it's revaluing some of the emotions that we have, or the beliefs around the emotions. Because as you said, Henry, one of the biggest things that's come up in a few questions with other people is, you know, the impact of shame, and actually having a look at and going, well, what are we ashamed of? What is that shame really about? Is it something that we should be or something that we go, hey, we've learnt from that, but what's the new focus now? In your case, Joel, it's raising those two girls. You know, in Thomas, it's preparing ready for that one to come through the door. And Henry, you know, leading up to it, at what part do we start looking at what we should be as fathers? When we've got the children, when they're on their way, or when we've, you know, before we even bring them, even think about having the children? Where do we start looking at the best way to raise our children? What are your thoughts on that, Joel?
I think actually I give Thomas and Henry a lot of credit for wanting to prepare before the children are actually before the children are present. I think, you know, whether it's as a soccer coach or a history teacher, I'm all about preparing ahead of time. You study for the test, you practice for the game, you put in the time and the work beforehand. For me, I got married for the first time when I was 19. I was halfway through college, and then just over a year later, found out we were pregnant with our first daughter. So my first daughter was born 2 weeks after I got my college diploma. My entire senior year was, dear Lord, let me graduate first, please. And he did, which I'm really thankful for. But so my daughter was born when I was 21 years old. I was still a kid. And I thought that I was ready to be a parent, because at 21, you think you know everything anyway. And, you know, the irony is, like, when I had a daughter, I had only changed 3 diapers in my whole life. And it was and all those were in the previous 6 months. I'd never been around little kids. And it became very obvious very quickly that while I was willing to learn, I was already very behind in my preparation. And it got to the point where my wife at the time, our daughter was about a year old. And most of the time I spent with her was, with the TV on watching a baseball game, feeding her a bottle or something. Well, kids don't do a whole lot before they're a year old anyway. And so I was thinking, we're spending quality time together. We're watching baseball. Like, this is good. And she came to me one day. She said, "Do you even like our daughter?" And it blew me away. And I'm thinking, what do you mean, do I even like? Of course I like her. And she said, "Well, you just don't ever spend any time with her unless you're watching a baseball or a soccer game." And I'm thinking, well, what else do they do? Like, we can't kick a soccer ball yet. We can't go for, it was weird because it didn't even occur to me that my behaviors weren't what they should be, because I'd never even been around little kids. I had no idea what I was getting into. And, to this day, I don't like little kids very much. I like mine. I like the ones in my family. But I teach high school for a reason. Little kids are smelly and sticky, and, they're not that bright. And so, like, I know that's terrible. I'm just telling it like it is.
Fair, man. It's absolutely fair.
But the thing is, I love my kids, and I love being around my family's little kids, because even at 36 years old, I am still learning how to be a better father, not just to my kids, but how to be a better adult to other people's little kids. And one of the most rewarding things is watching my daughters with other little kids. They are such wonderful caretakers. They love little children, and I would love to take credit for that. It's not me.
Yeah, well, I've got, as far as the range goes, it's interesting because I've now got grandkids. So my boys have all grown up. They were 4, 11 and 12 when their mum left. So I actually went from not, being like yourself, out there working, being the breadwinner, paying the mortgage and everything else. My wife worked as well, but the end result was I found that she wanted to go and find herself. So then I had 3 boys to raise. So that really changed. I had to really focus on changing where my focus was. It was about work. It was about creating a new company. I'd left the organisation I'd worked with. I've worked with for 23 years. I started my own business. And so now trying to keep that business afloat. And I look back and I asked myself, well, how much time did I really spend with the boys? How much did I impact on them? One thing I did do was I had a lot of men around me. Because one of the things I learned a while ago is the dad's role is not to get his son ready to turn him into a man. His actually job is to get him ready to that stage, but not turn him into a man. It's all about being able to get him ready and get the right men around so he can look at all those men and take a little bit from each one and create his own identity. Because if you look at, say, a man who raises his son, no other men around, they're pretty much a clone of each other. And so they don't really have, the boy has to wait until his dad passes on before he really steps into his own right. And for me, that was really true. It was at my 50th birthday party. A friend got the thing organised. I had a knife and I was cutting through the cake. And as I started to cut the cake, this realisation hit me. My father was 49 years old when he died. So now at the age of 50, I was older than he'd ever been. And I'd lived in that shadow of what I knew about him all those years. And all of a sudden now, where do I go to now? And how do, because as far as I'm concerned, my journey into manhood started on my 50th birthday. Before that, I was just an old boy. As they say, we are males by birth, but we are men by choice. And it's the work we put into that. So we need the right men around us. So one of the things I realised is we've got to be a great father. We've got to be that role model. Because in your case, Joel, your daughters are going to be looking at you. You're the example of the males that are out there. And this is what they've got to look forward to. So if a father doesn't have the right connection with his daughters, what sort of a man are they going to connect with in their life?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely one that hit me after my divorce, and it's something I'm really thankful for because my ex-wife is also remarried, and her husband and I get along pretty well. They also have a little toddler in their house now, and so my girls have a little brother, and I'm really thankful that I'm not the only example the girls have. I'm thankful that they have lots of grandparents that love them. They have grandfathers that are wonderful role models and examples, and you know, I would love to say that I've always been a perfect dad, and so my kids have perfect role models, and here's the kind of guy you should look for, and that's just not true. I'm really thankful there are other men around for my daughters to look to and say, no, look, we know our dad loved us, and he did the best he could. We're also thankful that we have a stepdad who loves us and granddads who love us. And like you kind of mentioned, for them, it's not becoming a man, but for them, it's picking a man as they get older. So they're going to pick someone who's probably not going to be exactly like me. But as long as they, as long as they pick a man who is a good man, who believes what we believe and who wants to live the kind of life that, they want to be a part of, like that's what I'm looking for. That's the kind of man that I've prayed for my daughters to marry since before they were born. And in some ways, I've tried to role model that. In other ways, I've fallen very short of that. And I'm glad other men around me set a better example in that area, just like you mentioned.
Good. So in your case, let me see. Thomas, as you're going, you're looking at adopting, first of all, boy or a girl?
I really have zero preference. We have an age range we're looking at, get a baby in the house. I'm open to anything.
Right. So what about your wife? She's preferring a boy or a girl, or pretty much the same mind?
I think she probably wouldn't admit it, but I think she's leaning towards a little boy.
Excellent. So would you say that when leading up to this, have you thought differently about, well, if it's a girl, I need to be this way. If it's a boy, I need to be that way?
I have. I wouldn't have thought before this, but the closer I get to it and the more other men I talk to, I do know there are different requirements. I think when I look back at how I was raised, I think it's tricky because my dad, his father died when he was young, and his grandfather was the same story. So it's a line of just men checking out early, a lot of absent fathers. And when I was young, my dad, for work, he traveled most of the year. So my memories of early childhood are kind of him gone. And when he was there, the work he did was pretty intense. So when he was home, he didn't want to talk about it. He just wanted us to kind of make him feel better and just kind of be there for the good times. So it's weird. We never, we always had food on the table, a place to live, didn't want for things. But emotionally, my dad was not there. And I know there's some things he tried when we got a little older for me and my brothers to bring us together. We would go on hunting trips, which is a bonding experience. But, opening day was my sister's birthday. And so we were always out hunting on her birthday. And stuff like that, sends a message, as Joel was saying. It says, well, this is more important than you. And again, I recognize how tricky it is. I haven't raised kids. But that messaging he did, that emotional absence, and, we were going through puberty. He would try to bond with us and tell us about men and women, but it was always through his way of doing it was telling us these stories of his wild oat days, when he was in college, which the older guy was that was wildly inappropriate and unhelpful, but that was him doing his best. It's So this is just to say that I think about all of those kind of moving pieces and how I will present them. It's my responsibility if I have a son to bring him through that for lack of a better phrase, that rite of passage into manhood. I know I'm going to have to do that deliberately, but I know that I will have a part to play in that with my daughter, and it will be different, but it's still going to be the same thing. There's an emotional presence required of me. So I don't have all this figured out, and I know a lot of this is on the job training, but it is something I think about. Yeah.
On the job training, and we don't get a manual for it.
That's exactly right. No do-overs either. You get
a manual for your phone, your lawn mowers, everything else, but for your relationship, your marriage, and for your children, no manuals. It's crazy. And there were things we've got to survive through. So it really comes down to, the manual is really what we learn from our parents, what role they play in everything else. As I said, I was fairly lucky. When I separated from my wife, I had the boys. So where a lot of fathers don't have their sons around, I had mine. But I fell into the same trap. I was running a business. So I was spending a lot of time at that business. I was still working for a short time with our national telephone carrier and started my business and had that running on the weekends as well. And then finally left the national carrier, but still worked 5, 6, 7 days a week. So being around the boys. But one of the things, then I started later on working from home. And so the boys went to school, I was out. They came home from school, I was out. So I had a much better connection with them. And I noticed that one of the boys one morning, 18 years old, on his way to school, stopped in the doorway, turned around and said, "Dad, wanted you to know that we're really lucky to have you." And I'm going, it just floored me. It dropped me. I went, "Well, why?" I said, "Your mother and I are separated." He said, "Yes." But he said, "But you don't bag her. She doesn't bag you." Because they were going to her place originally one night a week, and they'd turned into 2 nights. So Friday night through to Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning. And you know, she said, they said, "Well, you're not bagging her and she's not bagging you. We've got 2 houses to go to." And so I said, "Well, what about your mates?" They said, "You ever notice all the mates are over here after school? Their parents are fighting all the time." So the impact of what the kids actually learn, it's not so much what we tell the kids, it's what they observe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's extremely important in having that presence of mind of being around the children and being able to connect with them. So to be able to disconnect with other things that we're doing and just give them that little bit of time that they're really craving for. Otherwise, we lose our children.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
to be honest.
I was going to say, I know Henry mentioned something earlier too that I wanted to bring back up again, and that is the importance of being, and Thomas mentioned this too, the importance of being emotionally available for our kids and doing that in appropriate ways and doing that in ways that are constructive long term, because that's one where if we don't do that well, it can cause some pretty significant long term kind of issues. But I'm really, I was encouraged, Henry, I would love to actually hear a little bit more about that. I know you mentioned that was something that your dad maybe struggled with and your mom when you were younger. But I know, we keep up with each other on social media. I've been very encouraged to see some of your posts about your dad lately. That's been really good.
Am I all right to go?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So what was your question, John? Sorry.
Oh, it was really just wanting to hear more about the way that you and your dad have reconciled emotionally after struggling with that when you were younger.
I think the thing that we've done is we've spoken really honestly with each other. Like, I was helped very much by going to rehab, and I kind of said to my parents, like, that I have so much guilt going on right now that I need to do this on my own. So I needed to work on myself to become emotionally available to them. And then I could start having the conversations with them. And like, one of the defining moments, like, my parents were always so proud of their brothers, but never proud of me. I always felt like a disappointment, and that was like a weight on my shoulders. And that was entirely created by me. That was just my own feelings of inadequacy. When I finished rehab, my dad sent me a letter and he said, "I'm proud to call you my son." And that broke me. I literally didn't stop crying for like 3 hours. And I was able to say to him, because I knew so much about myself, there was nothing else you could have done. You were using the tools that you had available at the time. And I don't want you to feel guilty that you could have done something else because you couldn't. And things ended up the way they did. And I understand that you wanted me to die because I was a little shithead. Right? I'm not surprised that I got away easy on that. But what I respect is that now I can stand and say to you that I love you. And I know that you have difficulty in saying that to me, and that is okay. And it's that kind of mutual respect, and I understand him because I'm so similar to him. And whereas before I used to hate the way I did this with my hands, because that's what he does when he's reading. And now I love that. I love that I'm so similar to him because I see him as a genuinely beautiful man. Yes, he's flawed, but my God, aren't we all flawed? And I only hope that when I have children, I think one of us said, there are no manuals for this. And it kind of stresses me out that I'm not prepared, but I'm like, how prepared can I be, really? It's like, I don't think I can. The one thing that I want to be consistent is mine and Joe's relationship. And I've already said to her, like, Joe, when we go into this, I want us to write each other a letter so that when it gets really bad, we can open it up when we are tired, we are stressed, we are pulling our hair out, so we can see the route at which we have come from. And that's how I want to continue. And I always want my kids to know that they can speak to me, because nothing will be off bounds. I don't believe in holding anything back from them or talking down to them. If they want to know about self-harm, addiction, all this, then they can ask me, and I'll be like, actually, well, this is exactly how it is. You know, you are a human being. I am your father. That's it. It stresses me out that I'm not prepared, but it's the same with anything. We can read plenty of books, but nothing will ever replace going into the situation and trying it hands-on. And I've actually managed to avoid changing any nappies for all of my nieces and nephews. I am a master at avoiding the poop, let me tell you. But so that is, it's getting the poo under the fingernails, you know, that's what creeps me out. But anyway, that's an entire different topic.
You guys have it so easy these days. You got this cool dad. I had 2 boys who were 15 months apart. And I found myself in the laundry most of the time, either stuffing those cloth nappies into buckets of disinfectant and stuff, or with the washing machine, or putting them out in the clothesline. You have
my God.
My God, you've got it easy.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, we actually, and it's becoming a thing again, actually, especially in the past 10 years. A lot of people are going back to the cloth diapers and stuff instead of the disposable ones. We've got a bunch of friends that choose to do it that way. It's hilarious to look at that process. Like, just the things people don't tell you about having little kids. I tell people one of the easy ways to tell a person who's had kids from someone who hasn't is if you're around a little kid and they go to throw up, if you reach out to catch it, it's because you're a dad. Right? Because, I don't know why. It's not like you're going to put it back in, but like that's just what most people, like a kid throws up and you go, ew. And dads are like, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, and you reach out to catch it. Like, I don't know why you do that. That's just what you do when you're a dad. Like, I don't know. It's gross.
We can always tell who were which houses had children in it, because you look at the clotheslines, it looked like a sailing ship. All these.
So, Thomas, this is what you have to look forward to, just so you're aware.
I'm so glad that my brothers had kids, because before I had no idea, but now I've seen like the actual honest to God sacrifice that it takes. You know, it is like once they come along, it's not about you anymore. It's about them in its entirety. And that it made me grow up a lot. I was like, okay, I get it now. Like, this is something that is serious and is going to require me to do this. So the preparation has been like, and it may sound like a bit of a rubbish thing to say, but like, am I prepared to do this? Am I prepared to give all this up?
And that's a very valid,
honest conversation. You know?
But maybe the answer is no. You can still do it. Maybe you're not prepared. Maybe you know, but maybe you will.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I know that you just.
Maybe I'll.
You're going to say?
Huh?
Henry?
Oh no. I feel like if I wasn't, then I'd have some little bit of resentment that would carry over, and it would just tug at my heart a little bit, and it wouldn't feel right, because I know in some way I'd be giving that off. Like, I want to have kids, and I want to have kids. I want to be at the back. Like, I want to have.
And I think we'll need to have a better understanding of what it is to be a father before we step into that. This is why I take my hat off to both you, Thomas, and Henry, because you're putting that understanding into it beforehand. In my case, I was 23 when my first son came along, or was conceived. It was 24, 25, or 25 when my second son was born. I had no idea. And all of a sudden, you're immersed in it. You're immersed in it with those nappies, I can tell you. And you're up in the middle of the night and everything. And back in those days, I had an old waterbed. And it was one of these ones with no baffles in it. So you sit on it and you had the waves.
Yep.
Yeah, I tried it at night time. Babies would be crying, try and act as I was asleep. And of course, the wife would get down the end of the bed and give a big push. I'd raise up, my head and slap the backboard. And I'd still try and play dead. Got me into a lot of trouble. And you're going to be up with a lot of hours and everything else. That stuff's going to be natural. But then you understand exactly how tired you're going to be when you've got a young child, especially if they're colicky and things like that.
Yep.
What goes into it. But then there's also the pleasure, and that, as I said, my oldest son now is 40 years old. My youngest is 32.
Wow.
So between those three boys, I'm now a grandfather 5 times over. 4 grandsons and a granddaughter. And the pleasure I had with all of that as well. Yeah, there were times when my boys were growing up, I could have happily throttled them.
Yep.
But, these are the things. I do have a great relationship with my sons, but it's probably because I was the main caregiver. And I've been working at home. I would spend a lot more time with the boys. So that is really necessary as a father. We have that time with the kids because there's so much you miss out with. If you don't have that connection up front, you're going to go through life where you're going to have a lot more stress, trying to reconnect. And unless you really decide, right,
Funny
the need
say that, like,
is greater than the feeling the emotions and saying, I'm not going to deal with the issues with dad or mum, then the whole thing is that we separate and we miss out further again. So our emotional want to actually change has got to be great. So Henry, you were going to say?
Saying like that's so key. Like, even though growing up, my dad, and the problems that would come, he did used to, I think, because he knew who I was, he would take me out and spend time with me one-on-one, and it was just really silly things, like take me out on the boat out into the loch in Scotland and just do creative, nature-driven things with me. And they were the things that would root me in the most trying times. That was the love that kept me kept the fire lit, because I knew that it was there, and I knew that it was still there. That kept me on course. So I think spending time with your children, I want to spend time and have those silly little moments that to me might seem inconsequential. I've got an email to write, what the fuck is this going to mean to them? But I don't know what it's going to mean to them. So,
I think that's wonderful, and that's something, again, in our 2-household family, that's something I try to do when my kids are at their mom's house. My older daughter has a cell phone only when she's over there. My younger one doesn't, but on the weeks they're not here, I try to call at least 1 or 2 nights a week and talk with them, or I'll send them both an email or whatever it is, just to keep contact with them, to let them know I'm thinking about them, let them know I'm praying for them. And the last, we do switch over on Friday after school. So whichever parent drops them off at school, the other one picks them up. And so the last thing I say to them before we leave, before I leave for school in the morning, they're going to their mom's house. So I'll tell them, hey, I love you, and I hope you have a great week with your mom. And we try to build up that relationship as well, because one of the things I can do as a father to help set a good example is to be respectful of their mom. Even though we're not together anymore, I still need to treat their mother well in order to show this is how women ought to be treated, that kind of thing. And, some of what you guys were saying really made me think one of the things that has really impacted me as a dad is being willing to admit that I didn't have it all figured out. Because I really did think I knew pretty much everything at 21. Like, I didn't know how to put a bottle together. But the big parenting issues, I felt pretty confident about that. The longer I've been a parent, the less confident I am about having all that together. But I will say, having daughters has caused me to really be humbled. It's caused me to reevaluate everything, because what I thought I knew all came from my very male perspective. And it turns out that men and women are just wired differently. And so, I know, right? It's this shocking revelation. And so, I have 2 daughters. I've got a wife. I've got an ex-wife. And I have 30 high school girls that are in my soccer program. And every day I learn something new about what it means to have a good relationship with people that aren't like me. And so I know, Henry, you and I have talked before about just the concept of humility and the idea of putting other people's interests first. Well, that's a large part, like you mentioned earlier, that's a large part of what being a parent is. It's being willing to put aside what I'm working on and put their interests first, to show them that I love them, to show them that I care about them. The same thing you do with, when you're with your partner. Like, I want to show my wife that I love her. How do I do that? I turn off the soccer game and I go and I sit where she is and we hang out for a while. And that shows her that, same kind of thing with kids. And it took me a long time to learn that. And it took a lot of hard mistakes and the consequences of those mistakes for me to learn that. So again, I applaud you 2 guys for already thinking about those things before you become parents, because I really do feel like the preparation you put in now, that will help you moving down the road. So that's a really positive thing. My kids were born, I was 21 and 23. And so I was just not that bright yet, but I thought I was. And that was the only thing worse than not being very bright is not being bright and thinking you are. So that was a problem.
Yeah. It's a bit of a smack in the face when you finally realise that you got it wrong. But
yep.
It's very much the case as with Henry and with Thomas actually starting to understand the role of being a dad beforehand and putting that in play. Because if we go to school, we learn particular skills and everything else so we can get a job in that field. So we're prepared for that. Quite often we're not prepared for the discussions that we're going to actually, or raising our children. We need to take some time out and learn. And in that way, then we're better prepared. But I also like what you said about the relationship with your ex and everything else. If we put the children first and we understand that, well, in my case, my boys spend most of their time with me. I had issues with my ex, but I never said anything to them about it. But they could still pick it up in the vibes. But at the same time, I realised that, I got married a second time. That didn't last too long, but my boys had all moved out at that stage and moved back to their mother's place. My youngest then was about 16 years old. He was fighting with her all the time. And then he'd come away for a weekend with me, go back, he was respectful. Then this was a cycle that was repeating. And I realised that if he didn't respect his mother, and same as his brothers, they would go through all the different relationship breakups that I've had. Yeah. So I had to make sure that they respected their mother, not for her sake, but for their sake. They would grow up as strong men to be able to have better relationships with their partners. And then that improved the relationship that I had with her.
Yep.
To the point that many years later, she needed somewhere to stay for 3 months. I had a spare bedroom. She said, can I be a flatmate just for 3 months? Well, she stayed there for 3.5 years. So you can improve the relationships with the partner you've got. Because the other thing too, as you mentioned before, shame, and I wanted to sort of connect that to this as well. Shame and the emotions we go through, quite often, a lot of that stuff is preventing us from connecting with the people we need to connect with. If we're a bad son, for instance, or we think we're a bad son, we have shame in the way that we responded to our parents. We also have the shame that we have now as parents, or even as partners, in the relationships when they're strained. So how do we actually look at removing the shame itself? Because the shame doesn't serve any purpose except to hold us back. With the shame that you guys have actually felt in your life. Henry, how did you deal with that yourself?
The shame, I'm on my side of it, I had to show up to it. I had to get really painfully honest about what I was ashamed of, and only then could I start to present beliefs that would counteract that and tell myself that it was okay to feel this way, or the reason why I did that is okay within this context. And I think going forward and being a father around shame is to really encourage, if I'm not okay with my shame, then I'm just going to transfer it right onto the next person. As a relationship as intense, as emotionally trying, as physically exhausting as parenthood, if I'm carrying any shame, that's just going to bleed onto my kids. So simply. And if I haven't come to terms with it, then I'm just going to project it onto them. If they do something, say if I haven't worked on my shame and they do something which triggers my feelings of shame that I haven't worked on, I would only then criticize and shame them for doing the exact same thing that I had done. So it all comes down for me for doing the work, so that is not a risk to me. And if it's not a risk to me, then it's not going to be a risk to anyone else.
How about you guys, Thomas?
It's obviously it's an ongoing process, but for me, I think the turning point was, as Henry said, getting painfully honest with myself. One of the gifts of recovery is it's kind of easier to do that when you're forced to just, when you're sitting in rehab, honestly, that's kind of like, well, it can't get much worse. So really, what brought me here? No one else put me here. I put me here. How did I do that? And what do I want my life to be after this? And I did, I had a pretty painful experience with that. And I came through believing that I'd received a second chance at life. Counselors all told me, like, it's up to you at this point, man. What do you want to build? So pulling up that shame really became a process of seeing, well, who am I at my core? Because all that shame is not mine. It's somebody else's. It's someone else's judgments projected on me that I chose to believe and carry around like so much rotten luggage. Like, what do I need to do? What's required to put all that down finally? And just be okay with me and accept all the choices I made for good or for ill, like it's all been my life. So if I can stop judging that and have a point of view about it and live in the present and just, okay, I did those things. I was those things. That's all part of who I am now. It's made me who I am now. So what am I going to do going forward? Like, that's an opportunity just to just drop all of that. But, in looking at that, like, yeah, where did all these judgments and shame come from? Like, a lot of that came from my family, my father. And I'm sure this, he carried them from his. And it's just coming down this line of from man to man to man, father to son, father to son. And to finally, like, I get to the point where I'm like, you know what? This ends here with me. I will not take this one more step. And that's a hard process, but it's a necessary one. But it does come down to doing that shadow work and just saying, like, yeah, there's parts of my life I'm not proud of, but I accept them as mine. And they built this, who I am now.
Because as you were saying before, and that all of our experiences, and Joel, you were saying that, we don't really have that manual. We just, you and I just had children, and that was it. We didn't know what to do. And we then learnt on the job, so to speak. In that, there's also, as parents as well, or as a boy when I was growing up, there was the shame that I had, or the feelings that I didn't really measure up. I was always told I'd never be good enough. And so all of that stuff being on your shoulders all the time, there's the anger, there's the shame and everything that comes from that. And I thought, well, hang on, how much of this, I didn't have a manual. I hadn't been to school to learn any of this. There'd been no education on it. So really, and as Henry had said, you just do the best you can with what you know. So really, we have that feeling of shame, but what power does that, or what validity does that shame have in the first place? Because it's based on, we've got into a position where we had no knowledge of it before or how to handle it. We made decisions on the best information we had. And so should we be actually hanging on to that shame? We're just going, okay, no, I'll just learn from that. How can I do things better? What's another way of doing it? And as you said, Thomas, all of that shame is not just us. It's other people's impositions of what they put on us, what they imposed on us, and what we actually picked up and accepted.
Well, you think about, like, you're growing up as a little boy, and there's a constant judgment against you're being judged against the standard of manhood your dad is setting. Whether he's conscious of it or not. Like, okay, if your interests don't align, like for me, like, okay, I didn't like hunting. Oh, I wonder if Thomas is gay. Oh, he reads a lot. Well, that's not very manly. All these constant judgments about, like, are you doing what's acceptable as a man? Like, that stuff is powerful for a little boy.
Yeah.
Like, I think about that too. Like, what is my standard of masculinity? Is it open? Is it expansive? Or is it judgmental? Is it narrow? That's what the kids are going to pick up when they come into my house, my presence.
And as each of you have picked up on that, it's actually understanding ourselves first, really having a good look and go, well, where are my beliefs? What are they about? What is real and what isn't real? And then setting a standard of where you want to go from there. This has been good. So any other thoughts that you guys have got? We'll finish up very shortly.
Yeah, well, one thing that Thomas said that I really, really agree with, or a couple things. One is just the importance of being willing to evaluate ourselves honestly, especially when we're at our lowest points, and take responsibility and say, okay, what I did is what got me here. I don't have to keep doing those things. So let's make different choices going forward. Yes, there's still going to be consequences from those decisions. But my life moving forward doesn't have to be bound by those decisions. I went through a similar thing after I went through my divorce. And that was when my life really changed direction, is because I couldn't, once you hit rock bottom, you can't continue to lie or be in denial about who you are and what you've done. You have to own up to it. And that was huge. The other one is the idea of making sure that once we figure out who we are able to be the best example we can for our kids. And again, like you said, Alan, the idea of being able to do that, just doing the best we can. And I think, again, one of the key parts of that is when we realize that what we've done wasn't what we should have done, being willing to say so and just go to my kids and say, hey, you know what, girls? Okay, here was what the situation was. Here's the decision I made. That was not the decision I should have made. I'm really sorry, and I need you guys to forgive me, and let's move forward from there. Because we're never going to get it. Even if we had a manual, we'd still screw up sometimes. I still do stupid stuff, as a soccer coach, as a teacher, whatever it may be. One of the biggest parts, again, is just being willing to go back and purposely humble myself and try to reconcile by acknowledging I screwed up. That's my fault. I sometimes have to go back to my wife and say, honey, that's entirely my fault. What I did, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but I did, and that was my fault. And go to my kids, and especially with daughters, is being willing to go to them and say, hey, I did not mean to just crush you emotionally right there. I didn't mean to shut you out or dismiss your opinion. And I've done both of those things with my kids, and just go to them and say, I'm really sorry. I'm doing the best I can, and I will do better next time. Please forgive me, and let's move forward, And that's a huge part of it. And, I'm thankful to have the opportunity to do that with my kids. It's something that I'll never be able to really fully appreciate until they're out of the house. But having them here and being able to literally just go to them any day of the week and say, hey, let's go hang out. Because I want to build our relationship. Man, that's a great thing to get to do. So anyway, there's that.
How about
I love that, taking accountable. Absolutely love it.
Henry? What else?
Just just piggyback on what Joel said about being accountable, and if you make it to help, give yourself a break and give everyone else around you a break as well. That it's okay to make a mistake, and we just go back and say, you know what? Sorry that I did this. I was wrong. And then they hear the word that they love, which is, you were right.
Yep.
Just the acknowledgement, I think, is even more powerful than the apology. Just to tell a kid, yeah, I did that to you. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because one of the big things is, and I'm sure we all have it, one of the big things that drives kids crazy is when the adult refuses to acknowledge what everybody else in the room knows, which is you screwed up. Like as a teacher and as a coach and as a parent, if I've screwed up and 20 kids all know it and I go, nope, you're all wrong, then I just look like an idiot. That doesn't help. That doesn't build good relationships. It doesn't set a good example. It doesn't teach them how to be responsible adults, but it takes a willingness to just acknowledge our own flaws. And it's not fun, but it is necessary.
That's it. When you screw up, if you're able to, as you said, you're able to admit to it, you're actually giving the person you're telling, especially if there's the kids, you're giving them a gift, because you're telling them it's okay to screw up. It's okay then to actually admit it as well. So set themselves up. If you're always saying, no, I wasn't wrong, they're going to end up being the same.
Yeah.
And you're actually setting them up for a harder adult life.
Yeah, those kids are awful to have in a classroom, by the way. Just in case anybody's curious.
Oh, you're doing more than I could. There's no way I could teach kids. Take them out the bush, out the campfires and things like that, and pass them off to other people. A little bit more perfect. Okay. Well, thanks very much today, gentlemen, for coming along. What we'll do is, I know there's a lot more that we can talk about here, but it's been great having both Joel and Henry back on for the second time, and Thomas for the first time. So any of the other men who are listening to this who would like to, if you've got questions that you want answered by the panels and that, start sending messages into me. PM me with the particular items or questions that you have, so that we can then start talking about it and hopefully be able to find some answers. not that we're experts in anything other than the fact that, you know, a lot of the stuff that we've lived through, and because there's different views, because I love it, from a grandfather to a father to someone who's very close to being a father, and the other one who's got a twinkle in his eye. It's been a great discussion, because there's a lot of similarities in the way we're thinking, and there's a lot of wisdom in the fact that both Henry and also with Thomas talking about the preparation they're putting into this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's great wisdom in that, and a recommendation for all the men who are listening to this. If you are looking at becoming a father, start preparing yourself for it, because it's going to be the biggest job of your life, and probably one of the most important jobs of your life as well, that in your relationship. But also being able to realize that you may be separated from your partner, but if you don't handle that in the appropriate way, yes, there's a lot of angst, because the person we love so greatly now becomes our biggest enemy in a lot of cases. That then flows onto the kids, so the kids become the victims of it. So being aware that our behavior flows down to them, because they observe everything.
Mm-hmm.
So really important to look at that side of it. But thanks very much, gentlemen, for today. And we look forward to getting you all back on here again on another panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
Thomas, good to meet you. Henry, good to see you, man.
Yeah, Thomas, great to meet you. Lovely to see you again, Joel.
Always fun.